Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Iran and ISIS. Iran needs to subdue, even destroy ISIS, because they need, that is, Iran needs a land bridge through Iraq into Syria and then into Lebanon, in order to support their ideals, their objectives, their principles, their values, their worldview. They need to support Hezbollah, and they need to support Assad in Syria. It is a question of power and control of land, the land that stretches from Iran all the way to the ports of Lebanon. Now, when you look at the map, you'll get a sense of this. You've got to see these maps. Now, I'm a big fan of maps. Not understanding the maps means that you're not understanding what's going on in the ground. When you look at Iraq, you have to see that to the east of Iraq is Iran. In the north of Iraq, you've got Turkey and Syria as it comes down on the west. And then you've got Jordan, and then from Jordan to Saudi Arabia, and in the very south, you have Kuwait. This is important. What Iran needs is access to a Mediterranean port. So they need to get from the far east, where they are, across Iraq, into Syria, into Lebanon, and right into a Mediterranean port. And that is critical for them. Why? Because they need to export things and import things under the radar of the West, because their ports are being monitored. Then they need to transport them over land through Syria, northern Iraq, and into Iran itself. Iran is using that as a shipping lane to end around international sanctions. And only a few people are even paying attention to it. Now you are, and you should. Iran, in order to achieve this end, has thousands of troops in Iraq. They need to secure it and make it certain that they can travel through Iraq. The head of the Revolutionary Guard of Iran is actually inside of Iraq, advising the Iraqis and advising to take in charge of their thousands of Revolutionary Guard forces. They're trying to stop this group called ISIS, or just ICE, the Islamic State. Remember what ISIS is. They have a vision. They have a vision to control an entire region. And it doesn't just mean Syria. El-Shams means much more than that. It means Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Turkey and Cyprus and Palestine, or Israel as we call it, and a small part of Iran also. It means a swath of land which is huge. So this conflict is not a small one. It's a huge conflict, which resonates far greater than you could possibly imagine. You see the conflict as a group of extremists, Al-Qaeda rejectionists, people that rejected Al-Qaeda and are more strict than they are, more extremist than they are. That's what you think ISIS is. It is that, but it's much, much more. It resonates in the conflict between the Shiites and the Sunnis, because ISIS are Sunnis. The Iranians are Shiites. Most of Iraq are also Shiites, which is another major statement and point of why the Iranians have a major stake in what takes place in Iraq. Many of their holy sites, Shiite holy sites, are in Iraq. Because ISIS is Sunni, they are at one another's throats. Each, the Shiites and the Sunnis, view one another as heretics. Actually, so much so, they defy basic principles of Islam. Each see the other as a heretic defying a principle of Islam, which, by the way, when you defy a basic principle of Islam, a basic principle enables the other to kill you with impunity. That means they could kill one another. I and you don't have that. Jews, let's say, for instance, don't have the same conflict as heretics, one to the other. You see, in our societies that we live in, we agree to disagree. However, in the pre-modern world, when you disagree with someone, you can actually kill them. That's what you do, and that's what's taking place in terms of the ISIS-Iran conflict, the Sunni-Shiite conflict. Iran has to then check the advance of Sunni lands, the land grab itself, which would threaten the Shiites through that whole region. If they don't, that means that the Sunnis will have a hand up on the Shiites. The Sunni-Shiite split is not new. It dates itself all the way back to the time of Muhammad. The question at the time was, who would be the appropriate successor to Muhammad? And that today is the conflict. Those who followed one branch went to the Shiites. Those who followed another branch went to the Sunnis. And the two have seen the other as heretics since the death of Muhammad. And that's why they literally and truly can execute one another, both being Muslims, without the least second of thought. I've also been thinking about this character Baghdadi. He pronounced himself the leader of the Islamic State. He's a Khalif. I have to explain what a Khalif is because it's not what you think it is. Again, we're limited by our Western understanding of these things. It's not just a religious leader. That would be enormously limiting. He's not the equivalent of a Rebbe in the Hasidut. He's not the equivalent of the Pope. He's a combined character. He's an emperor and pope together. He's a leader of both the governmental institutions and the religious institutions at the same time. The Islamic State is a state run by Islamic law, by Sharia as it's called. But the state is not just the land. It's the entire people. In Arabic, it's referred to as the Ummah. That's not all that different, by the way, than the Hebrew word people. You see, in Judaism, we understand this a little better because we are not simply a faith. We're connected in a lot of different ways, beyond faith, beyond connecting to land, beyond religion, beyond God even. We're intersecting in all these different kinds of things. The Khalif is the character who leads all of that together. It means, interestingly, the root of Khalif in Arabic actually means successor. The same basic concept that I was referring to earlier in terms of who would be the successor of Muhammad. He's seen then in Sunni tradition as the leading successor of Muhammad, the leader of Islamic society, culture, land, environment, and of course, religion. The Khalif is everything. The Khalif is wrapped up in all these different kinds of concepts of leadership, of peoplehood, of land, of tradition, and of course of Islam. It's no small thing when you announce that you're the Khalif. It's transformational. Islam is like Judaism in that way. It's all encompassing. What they used to call in the 1960s and 70s, Judaism is a way of life. That's what we're talking about here with Islam. It's not a religion like we think of it in the West. Every part of life is subsumed within it. So much so, the modern world doesn't even understand this. The modern world refers to and thinks of Islam like they do Christianity. It's not the case. It's not simply faith-based. It's more than that. Do you know what Islam actually means? The word itself doesn't mean peace. It means complete submission. Submission to the concept greater than you, greater than that. It means submission to the concept of Islamic power and authority. That's what Islam means. Total submission to life. Baghdadi recently spoke at the great mosque in Mosul. He wore black to remind everyone of the style of the past because caliphs wore black. However, people were drawn to his watch. A huge amount of discussion took place about his watch. The internet lit up about his watch. Why? Because people were trying to figure out what kind of watch it was. It was an extremely expensive watch, that was for sure. People asserted, well, maybe it was the Omega, or maybe it was the Rolex. They were trying to figure out what watch it was. The web was full of people suggesting which watch it could be and how much it cost. The upshot was whether it was proper or not for the Caliph to even wear such an expensive watch. It's another conversation entirely. But it was interesting because some also asked, maybe it was pillaged. Maybe they didn't buy it from a store. Maybe it was taken from some of the people that he conquered. Interesting question, a part of the conquest, which is what the Caliph often does. But others said, should a Caliph wear a Swiss watch or a European watch? Some asked that question. The Khalif is supposed to not care about value and fashion, worldly possessions. If he needed a watch at all, a Timex would have done just fine. That was definitely not the message he wanted to convey, but it's part of the message in the modern world when you have these modern phenomena like YouTube, like messages in terms of social media. You can see what's going on. His message, though, in the end, was not about the watch. That's not what he wanted to say. This is what he did say. He said, if you agree with me, he's speaking to the Sunnis, join me. And if you disagree with me, he said, advise me. That means help me. It was a brilliant play to those who disagree. That determined if you were an insider or an outsider. If you were an insider, you could disagree and live. If you were an outsider, your fate is determined. Coming up next, points of view. The first column I want to talk to you about is Jennifer Rubin writing in the Washington Post on July 3rd, 2014. The column is called The Cycle of Violence, Canard. Now, this is critical because for those of you who don't read Jennifer Rubin, she is a regular in the Post. She's actually a blogger, and they often take her stuff and put it into the main paper. She is certainly right of center and is very biting. Sometimes she has a hilarious wit. For obvious reasons, she is often not just the center, but she is the center of controversy. She is sometimes a supporter of the Tea Party and sometimes not. She begins this essay about the canard of the cycle of violence in the following way. She says, Israel began to mobilize troops Thursday to the area around the Gaza Strip in response to what it said was a sharp increase in rocket fire to its territory over the past 24 hours. The move comes as tensions between Israelis and Palestinians flared to their worst level in years following the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli students and the suspected revenge killing of an Arab teenager in East Jerusalem. She continues, we will hear calls in the days that follow for Israel to, quote, end the cycle of violence. There is no more noxious phrase than that to describe the conflict. It presumes that the violence is a thing, virtually independent of the players, or worse, the result of a lack of restraint on both. The phrase conceals how the cycle began and treats all violence, the kidnapping and the killing of children, as well as the targeted response directed at Hamas military targets as morally interchangeable. Moreover, lost in the discussion is the response of the 2 sides to the killing of 3 Jewish students and of 1 Palestinian. Gleeful celebration by Hamas and denunciation, direction to investigate, and eventual prosecution by Israel. That tells us all we need to know about which side is prepared to live in peace with the other. Jennifer Rubin slams the Obama White House and the State Department for their moral relativism and says how unfair it is, but worse, how that they are forcing Abbas to choose between, they are not forcing Abbas to choose between Hamas and the United States, between right and wrong. Rubin says the White House and the State Department should be forcing the Palestinian Authority to stop what they're doing with Hamas and join the policy of the United States. Instead, the United States is empowering the Palestinian Authority and Hamas through terror. Support for Israel should be bipartisan. There's no question about it. And we have to look at that and think about it and realize it. Rubin is saying something critical about the cycle of violence. We, viewers, participants in today's political world, have to know that support for Israel is not about being Republican or Democratic. It's about what it means to stand up for the right thing. It's in our gut. We feel uncomfortable when people use the expression the cycle of violence. We don't really understand why, but Rubin explained why. Because it assumes that both sides are locked into a tit for tat, that there's no history, and that there's nothing like a controlled response. Israel is being extremely controlled in their tit for tat, as people call it. And that simply is important to underscore constantly. and to think about. One might not like Israel's response, but it's certainly a controlled and measured one. About that, there is no question. The second column I wanted to talk about is Stephen Friedman, who writes in USA Today on July 4th, 2014. The column is called Love American and Criticize Her Too. Steve Friedman is the president of MTV, for those of you that don't know that. He is trying to explain what young people are thinking when it comes to patriotism. He says they're pro-American, but they don't like the world the way we liked it in our generation. They don't even like the word patriotic. They like to think of themselves as pro-American. They don't like the Pledge of Allegiance. They think of it as a completely different concept. He begins his essay by saying, as someone who spends his life creating programming for millennials, those are the people that were born in that period that we're talking about, and who works with a lot of them as well, I've been struck by recent images of young Americans packed into parks and spilling out the bars, draped in the stars and stripes, cheering on the U.S. team during its thrilling World Cup run. They're wearing their love of their country for all to see. It's striking because young people in America often get a bad rap for a perceived lack of patriotism. A recent Pew study actually went on to try to explain this. It made headlines noting that fewer millennials describe themselves as patriotic than other generations. Millennial generation born in the late 1980s and 90s have a completely different view of America. Friedman ends, by the way, with real hope. He quotes JFK. JFK said, without debate, without criticism, no administration, no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. Young people are rooting for our nation, questioning it and challenging it, and pushing America to improve, freed from the strict division between patriot and protester. Millennials are making our country stronger. You see, we often criticize youth. We bemoan their priorities. We say that they are not like previous generations. But youth rise to the challenge, as they always have. As Jews, we say the same thing. Kids today don't have the relationship with Israel or their synagogue or their community that their parents did, that we, the parents' generation, had. Indeed, Shimon Ravidovich said, he wrote a spectacular essay called Israel, the Ever-Dying People, in which he explained that every generation sees itself as the last, that the one before it was always better than the one that's coming up. In reality, it's not true. The next generation has a lot going for it, and they will pick up the mantle just the way our generation did. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. Jimmy Margolis, in Newsday on July 3rd, 2014, gives a remarkable depiction, something that caused me again to laugh. The caption reads, "Finding Common Ground." And there are two headstones on the cemetery hill, one with the Star of David and one with a crescent. One reads Israeli civilians and the other reads Palestinian civilians. The story told in this spectacular cartoon is that the real casualties of war are civilians. The real casualties of the conflict in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians are not their leaders. They're not bearing the brunt of the conflict. It's rather the civilians themselves. And it's truly telling and enormously critical and, honestly, worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about because, in reality, we, the viewers, we, the participants in society, have something to say about the directions of our society. It's not just up to our leaders to make those decisions. We have to tell them what we think and how we feel. That's why that cartoon is so telling. Steve Kelly in the Times-Picayune on June 29th, 2014, he sees this experience with the IRS as being just off the wall. And he depicts a student in front of a teacher saying, "No, this time the dog didn't eat my homework. This time the hard drive crashed." Now, obviously, for a time immemorial, the major excuse for not doing your homework was the dog ate my homework. But now today, because of the conflict and the issues that are going on in today's world, the IRS hard drive crashing is even more believable than the dog ate my homework. That's funny. It's funny because it gives us a way of dealing with our normal lives as well as the huge political issues at the same time. All of us have hard drives that crash, everyone. But that doesn't necessarily mean we don't have backups. And that's what he's saying also. In the China Daily, Luigi, on July 5th, shows you something that you have not and will not see in the Western press at all. That's why it's important to look sometimes at what happens outside our borders to find out what's going on. In this particular cartoon, a chicken is in front of a computer game. And the game is called the Israeli-Palestinian Peace. Now, the screen reads, "Game over, restart, question mark." At that point, the chicken shouts, "I can't stand it anymore." And you can imagine. So here, China is making a serious critique of the Middle East peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In other words, should they restart the game? The game is over. You want to restart it again and again and again? Is it a computer game which just goes back and forward, then back and forward? Do you want to play again? If you play again, is it going to result in the same end, which means game over, restart? That was a powerful and important and insightful critique of the Palestinian-Israeli peace process conducted by and large by the Americans. And you can't miss that critique. It's the Chinese critiquing the United States also. Steve Greenberg, in the Ventura County Reporter, makes fun of the soccer World Cup, which, for those of you that didn't pay attention to the World Cup, it was the event of 4 years. More people watch it than anything else. And the ripple effect takes weeks, months, and even years. It's hugely, hugely powerful and hugely instrumental and has something to say to environments around the world. So this particular cartoon has a soccer game, the game between Iraq and Syria. And the scoreboard writes on it, brutal terrorist Sunnis and brutal terrorist Shiites. And then you have the score. And the score is actually made in skull and bones, crossbones. It's the scoring itself, sad, but then again also telling. In a moment, my perspective and a few predictions. Terrorists are using social media and will continue to use it. They use it to communicate and to intimidate. ISIS is using it better than even Al-Qaeda has used it. A single beheading posted on social media reverberates around the Islamic world, especially in Iraq. And if you don't realize that, you don't realize that they're combining modern techniques with ancient traditions in order to achieve their ends. Iran and the US have nearly no real trust, but forces are pushing them together. In this particular case in Iraq, both the United States and Iran are combating ISIS. Now they're sharing and talking about how they can best stop the Sunni onslaught into Iraq itself. And that may lead to real agreements on other issues. What's the most important issue? The nuclear issue. Now that said, I'm a little hopeful about this idea. I think that it's important that the Iranians and the United States are talking and agreeing on certain things. But that does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that they will actually come to a real agreement with regard to their nuclear questions. Because the nuclear question is what separates them dramatically. However, talking and agreement on other issues like ISIS can be very helpful in the long run, in the larger scenario. 9 Jews of one family were smuggled out of Syria into Israel recently. It happened in May. Now, what you need to know about here is that this is ironic. Actually, it's downright mind-boggling. It's ironic because 1 million Syrians have run away from Syria, but all of them are refugees. This group of 9 made it across the border. They were smuggled by Israelis and by non-Israelis. They were smuggled by smugglers themselves. They had a huge amount of pay and money, and bakshish, as it's called in Arabic, which was a bribery, was used. in order to bring this group of 9 across the border. It didn't happen in one slew. It happened in several sections. The first group, by the way, was just the mother and her oldest son. And they were reunited in Israel with the rest of their extended family. They had come from Damascus. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, tell me what you're thinking. Let me know. Write me at Micah@shalomtv.com. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that there is a competition for nearly everything in the world? And the Guinness Book of World Records has that. They have the largest falafel in the Guinness Book of World Records, the most hot dogs eaten. Actually, I was a Guinness judge for the largest falafel ball. Well, the largest pepper in the world was grown in Kibbutz Ein Yahav in the northern Arava Desert in Israel. The pepper weighed a half a kilo, 1.1 pounds. So we should remember that Israel is in the news, sometimes for really fun things, not just for crisis. Thank you for thinking out loud with me today. Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on Shalom TV.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.